I'm Barbara Levin, your host, and this is PhotoTalk. Sponsored by Professional Women Photographers, better known as PWP, PhotoTalk was created specifically to explore the roles, history, perspectives, and accomplishments of women in today's world of photography. Tonight, our guest is fine art photographer Martine Fougeron. Martine is an award-winning, nationally and internationally exhibited photographer, born and raised in France, who has been living and working in New York City for the last 16 years. She is a graduate of Wellesley College in Massachusetts and l'Institut d'études politiques de Paris. Martine studied photography at the International Center of Photography in New York City. Her work is represented in major public and private collections, such as the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where she won the 2010 Photography Portfolio Competition. Martine has also worked as an editorial photographer for The New Yorker, The New York Times, and New York Magazine. But prior to photography, Martine enjoyed a successful career as a creative director of perfumery, where she was the nose of the noses for 20 world-class perfumers. She's also a mother, as well as one of the first women in France to become a hot air balloon pilot. Martine, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Barbara.
With such a successful and exciting career as a creative director in perfumery, what possessed you to relinquish it and go into photography?
It's a good question. Possession, I think when you have a passion, you don't think too much, you just go for it. I'd been working in the perfumery for about, 15 years, and I was basically managing other perfumers' creativity. And I think after 2001, especially 9/11, I just sort of woke up and said to myself, I want to explore my own creativity, and I think I want to go back to my first passion, which was photography. And when I was smelling perfumes, it was always like a relationship between the perfume and my visual sense. I would smell the perfume and I would see colors, composition, masses of, I would see visually, basically, and I would translate the fragrance into a visual kind of atmosphere that I would then translate to the perfumers, and I wanted to go back to the visual side.
So, and I believe they call that synesthesia, where you combine two of your senses, where you can see words and colors, or in your case, pictures through smells. And so where did you decide to study photography?
Then it grew organically. My father and my grandfather always be taking a lot of photos. Mm-hmm. In a time when I grew up, and in France, there was no television. So basically, what they were shooting and their photographs they would show to us on these big screens, and these almost manual things. And so I had that in the back of my memory, being basically myself a subject, and being, seeing old-fashioned cameras, old-fashioned kind of equipment and visually stimulation. So I started taking classes at ICP. And I was taking more and more classes until one of my friends said, "Don't you think you should perhaps be doing a lot more with photography?" And I sort of woke up and said, yeah, I'm going to go back to school. And I did.
So you went to the International Center of Photography. And did they give you assignments? Did you have subjects in mind? Because your major project right now that we're going to be looking at is photographs of your children. So how did that come about? Why did you find your children such compelling subjects?
Yeah, it was a bit of an accident. I think all creative processes can be a bit of an accident. Mm-hmm. I decided to take a large format camera class just because I was thinking of my father, my grandfather, with all this kind of really neat old equipment. So this is a big camera. It's very heavy. It has bowels. Takes a lot of adjustments. And I decided that I would photograph my son, Nicholas, who was 14 at the time, and my younger son, 13, having dinner. And I wanted to get a scene a little bit like Vermeer. So, it was my personal setting in my, I was living at the time in the West Village in New York, and I'd set up some lighting, put that huge camera on the floor with lighting, and I decided I would fix a nice nice dinner for them, a cheeseburger dinner.
A cheeseburger.
A cheeseburger dinner, which they adored.
Typical for Teenage sons.
Typical for teenage sons.
Right.
And I knew it was difficult. You have to go under a ground glass, put a cloth on your head, focus. So I had pre-focused my son's head because people, they're people of habit. And I snapped a picture because they're quite impatient at that age.
Why don't we look at that picture since you're talking about it?
Oh, yeah, sure,
Okay.
sure.
And,
yeah.
And it's called Nicholas and Adrian Dining?
Nicholas and Adrian Dining. So it explains a bit the way my process, I sort of like pre-organize things, though it's part of my house. My inspiration was Vermeer, the painter Vermeer, who only basically painted from scenes of his domestic life. Right. And you would rearrange carpets or little saucers, put different and that's why I do it. It's staged, but not completely staged. You see, I prepare the setting, but basically the people my sons were natural. And once I took that picture, my older son, Nicholas, is on the right. He's 14 at the time. My younger son, Adrian, is on the left. He's going into his hamburger. He's 13. They look worlds apart, but they're only 1 year apart because Nicholas had grown. He was already a teenager, and the younger one was still a baby. I showed this picture in class at ICP, and all the professors said, this is such an interesting subject, the way you're treating adolescence in that intimate style. You should pursue it. And I was sort of shocked. This was just a trial photo for me, a way to, get a great 4x5 picture, but it was certainly not a project photo. And the more I thought about it, I continued. Because I think that seeing that picture, if you want, the marvel about photography is you see something objective then. Yeah. It allowed me to see the resistance of my elder son. He's a bit defiant. Mm-hmm. And the fact that my younger son was so natural. So looking intensely at the ground, the viewfinder, the ground glass, allowed me to see that my older son was much more antagonistic than I thought towards me.
Towards the whole idea. Well, let's see how that developed. I mean, your being their mother and the photographer had to provoke all kinds of feelings on both sides. Let's move to the next picture and
well, this is, it got
Yeah.
more and more intense with my older son, Nicolas, because he was in full rebellion. And I felt the rebellion was natural. He has to cut the umbilical cord. Mm-hmm. He has to assert himself. Except that I had no photos of him. And by that time, I had sort of thought, this is a project on both my sons. It'll be called tête-à-tête, a face-to-face between me as the mother, photographer, and them, and also a face-to-face amongst themselves. Each time I would knock on his door, which was always closed, I would get the same thing. If he saw that I had a camera in my hand, he would just shake his head and go,
oh no.
A resistance. So I call this Nicholas resisting, though it's kind of a resisting dance. And I thought to alleviate the sorrow I had at his sort of antagonism, I would at least sort of sublimate it by taking a photo.
By recording it.
Recording it.
You could talk about it later.
Yes, yes.
And then we move to a photograph of Adrian on the couch, which is a much more thoughtful picture.
Yeah. It's called Adrian on a Blue Couch, and it shows Adrian at the same time. Adrian is 13. Adrian has still not turned adolescent. He's still a child. He's still almost a baby. Though you're starting to feel that ambiguity of adolescence that doesn't last long between a child and a little bit more adult, but also the kind of feminine qualities, androgynous qualities that you have at that age that I was sort of fascinated with, but also that interiorized state. And this project was a lot about the different moods adolescents get into, this kind of melancholia that they get into. I thought was something that I was really interested in because it is an age where you question so many things. And I think it's very important to leave that questioning be. But I wanted to record that questioning. So Adrian was very happy to have me photographing him because then we would start talking and he'd love to see the pictures.
Well, he also becomes the center of attention and he has you all to himself in a very intimate way. So do you think being a woman was a distinct advantage to photographing this type of subject? Do you think a man or their father might have done it in the same way?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think that, if we look at the next picture I could explain things perhaps better.
Well, let's
yeah,
look at
Nick,
the
Adrian
next one.
bathing,
Yeah, right.
just because I think there's that kind of tenderness that I have in the way I look at them, at my children, and there's kind of, you feel the love, I think, that's there, that's present. And I think a mother, in a way, lives, I think women in general live in the present. They live in the now. They have to deal with the now.
They kind of have to, don't they?
They have to. And I think this now is something that is sort of conducive to this kind of intimacy and immediacy. And I think also, when I started the project, I realized that a lot of the photography had been done on adolescents, had been sensationalist. Drugs, abuse,
Yes.
suburbs, violence. And I just didn't feel that. I mean, I felt my sons were going through changes and metamorphosis, but it was more about internal metamorphosis. That's what I wanted to translate, not the sensational that we always see. So I wanted to translate that kind of more interiorized calmness. Like this photo, I think it's about sort of letting go in a bath. It's a child sort of like, it's a peacefulness, but at the same time it's a peacefulness that can be the ultimate peace. And many people have said to me, oh, he could be dead.
Really?
Which
Well,
I'd never seen, really.
It's really interesting photograph, one, in that he allowed you into the bathroom while he was taking the bath, and also he has this cork around his neck. What did that represent?
Oh, the cork is something, he took a big trip in the Adirondack, and it was very important for him because it was like every day they would have to do many miles, and he felt he had overcome something. He had sort of become more of a man doing that, and they gave him this little cork that he always wore, and on the cork is also inscribed his best quality and his worst defect, so he always kept it to remind him that he had to work on his defect but keep his quality.
Can you tell us what it says?
Oh, yeah, he did tell me years later, so I can reveal it. His biggest quality was curiosity, and he is a very curious child, open, always sort of like up to new adventures. And his defect was not being totally dependable.
Interesting, interesting.
Which is sort of the other side of the curiosity, you know?
Yes, yes. So this became a project that you've been pursuing for years now, and also, are you still doing film in large format, or have you changed?
It's interesting. When I always, after I finished the first series, which was at home in our really closed atmosphere of at home in our, in living in the West Village, we went back to France. My children, we could look at the next photo if you want, because my children are actually bicultural. They're French and American. And when we did go to France, because I really want them to keep those roots, we would spend a month in France. And I started to think, I'm going to continue this project because I really was interested in the way they were interacting with their French friends. So we would do all these trips together, visiting Arles, and go back to my roots where I grew up in the south of France, in the Cévennes, in the mountains, where we have this very modest kind of like old stone house. And I thought, oh, I'm going to photograph them interacting with their French friends. So the first one is they're sort of acting out, they're, acting out as if they have a cigarette in their hand.
So we should see that one. It's called Adrian and Theo in Arles.
Yeah, so they're, acting out James Dean, like the one on the right. He feels he's like a little actor. And my son with a cigarette trying to act cool, but a little hippie-like. And what I did is I saw they were dressed that way this day. And I sort of asked them, could you go against this wall, which seems so whimsical, with the no smoking and this kind of little person that looks like a graffiti. I like the color combination, and I took the photographs then. So, it's a mix of chance and also the way they're dressed and the mood of the day,
Yeah, so they're getting a little bit older now, and you started including their friends as well.
Yeah, so
expanding the project. And
right.
I believe you were now using a digital camera.
Yes, I started in the next photo we could see, it's the Nicholas Kiss, where this is coming back to New York now. They're 15 and 16. And it's called Nicholas's Kiss because I surprised him. I was ready. I was using a digital camera because I really needed, they were getting more and more into their tribe life. So more and more friends were coming at home. My home was a haven to them because I'm very liberal, but also we had quite a big house. and they would gang up in these rooms. And we live now in the digital era with Facebook. And within half an hour, everyone is aware that there's a party. So we would have these big crowds, which I sort of had to channel because you could be with 100 people in the span of half an hour. This was one of these parties. And I thought, oh, my camera was always an excuse to be there. And they knew I had to be there because things could get out of hand. And I was, thought I should use the flash. And as I'm walking through the party, and they liked me because they trusted me, I did see my son, who was going ardently towards his girlfriend's lips. And she saw me, she froze, but he did not see me. He was so into her. And they were ganging up in rooms. So, it's like this picture, which I took at night. So there could be 20 in one little bedroom. This is called Adrian on drums. So by this time, he's gotten a haircut. He's doing djembe. And, they accepted me because they knew that they had a veto on the photos. If they didn't like a photo, it would not be shown. But I thought it was interesting how teenagers are all in their little world, and they're not looking at each other. They're all just in their world.
It's so interesting in that sense. They are in their own little world, and it's as if you, instead of being the mother and the photographer, were like a little fly on the wall, being able to record all this in what I would call like the social landscape.
Yeah, it is a social landscape, and I was fascinated by that social landscape. I studied sociology, and it was so different from my adolescence. Mm-hmm. And, it was always when I was seeing them, I had a feel for my adolescence, which I grew up in France, and I feel that without the television and with very strict parents, I grew up closer to the way we were raised in the 19th century. With no dialogue between the parents, you couldn't really say what you were doing because you would be judged and you would be reprimanded. And I was sort of determined to raise my kids differently and really be able to understand what they were up to. And I feel they felt that trust, and this is sort of what's coming through, I think, in the photos, that you say, I'm just like one of them. It is that they know I'm not judging them. I'm embracing their life, which does not mean I embrace everything. There were issues sometimes, but,
Of course.
Yeah.
So going back to more quieter moments, we have in this photo, Nicholas reading.
Yeah, I just loved seeing him reading, and for the first time reading a serious book and not just a Harry Potter book. He's reading something about interfaith spirituality in a beautiful atmosphere, and just thought that was really something that was moving to me. And he seemed very enthralled in his photos.
And also in this one, Adrian's time. This one is especially beautiful. It's almost like a semi-silhouette taken at dusk. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's the way I work. I saw it. I did not like that hairdo. He had just chopped off all his hair. I think to alleviate the fact that I was quite disappointed. He could ask me, do you like it? I did not like it. I didn't want to show it too much to him. He was, I asked him to sit on on that, by the terrace, and there was like a resonance between the hills, the sunset, and his bald head. And I thought, well, let's make something beautiful out of this kind of new hairdo, and this new person. All of a sudden, he was becoming more of a teenager.
Well, he was getting older. I mean, as they get older, and
Right.
we're all getting older, so
Yes.
I guess the point of view starts to change a little bit as well. In this next one, you have the two brothers together.
Yeah, the two brothers. That was an important photo for me because all of a sudden they started getting along. For years they had fought, and I think that they started revolting a bit, both of them together, against me, though they had embraced the pictures because all the friends liked the pictures. So by that time, they were okay on my taking pictures of them, but I saw them bonding in a certain way, and I really wanted to record that new bond before it was only fighting.
Okay, and then we have here Nicholas plucking.
Oh, it's Adrian plucking.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah, Adrian, by that time, he's like 15 and a half. He did not want any hair. So any hair that could show that he was growing up and he was becoming basically an adolescent and a little man, he would pluck systematically. And I thought that negation of becoming a man was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. But I take it didn't last very long.
It didn't last very long. All of a sudden, he started to grow very suddenly out of childhood, and then he became revolted, and he didn't like me, sort of asking him questions, or if I happened to reprimand him, he had quite an impulsive kind of reaction. And
Well,
his brother is very happy about that.
Which we can see in this next photo called the finger.
The finger, yeah, I know. You know, I had always tried to take a picture of the elder brother, Nicholas, who's on the right, acting out, you know,
Right.
not showing his face. But it's finally Adrian who did that strong gesture. And as I said again, I think it's natural for kids to revolt. I'm not saying it's a bit, you know, vulgar, but I felt I had to record it because that was part of reality.
Yes, of course. So why don't we look? Oh, here we have the sleepover.
Ah, yes, they would all come, all the friends. It's an age where, you know, we're living in Manhattan. It's dangerous to go back at night. So many nights I would accept that 4 or 5 would sleep over because at least I felt they were safe, as opposed to, you know, they might have been doing I don't know what. And they would just all gang up in one room and just sleep on these sleeping bags. And, you know, the way I work, I asked them the night before, I said, you know, I might want to take a picture of you waking up. And so I just put up a little ladder and you saw all the natural light of the morning, and I took the picture from the top. And I liked the feeling because I could feel that all the things that we're thinking about, what had gone on, all the little attractions, all the, you know, it's like a whole panorama of their streamline of thoughts.
So you become part of the pack as well. You become such an integral part.
Because I knew them very young, Barbara. They both all go to the same school, the Lycée Français in New York, which is very multicultural. But they had seen me working on this project since they were really young, and these kids are kids I've been following since they were 7 or 8, and they knew I was not out to portray them in any way that could disturb them. And when they saw the pictures, they really felt it expressed who they were as they were growing up.
So there was a lot of trust
Yes.
there as well, and they were able to expose themselves, and you as the photographer were able to capture that. So if we look at some of the next pictures, there's Nicholas as Godard. I guess he was
Yes.
in his experimental phase.
He wants to be a film director, so that's why it was sort of like a revelation of his vocation. And after, I guess you want to talk about the after prom, no? Because the after prom...
We'll have to move through these a little more
Sure.
quickly.
It's the last rite of initiation, the after prom, and, you know, that's, I thought the last chapter of adolescence is when they go off on their own and have the last night together. And they allowed me in, which was fantastic.
And we'll just do one more, and that's the Gordon's rite of passage to
Yes.
show that they're all grown up now and drinking.
Drinking a bit, yes, but, you know, it's not one way. It's in the disco bus. It's one bottle of gin for 18 kids. It's okay.
It's okay. I just want to, moving along in your career, you're doing books and exhibitions, and if you could just show us briefly the book that you're doing and talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to be, in 2013, it's all of this project, Tête-à-Tête, is going to be published in a book. So it's a rather big book covering 7 years, and I'm very happy about it because it's, a book stays, you know. It stays, and it's going to be published by Steidl, which is a very good German publisher. So it's sort of like the final concrete, you know, how would you say, fulfillment of this project.
Absolutely. And will we all be able to buy it in the local bookstores?
Yes, absolutely. That's why this is the announcement from Steidl. This shows that it's concrete, that it's in the catalog, and this is what all the bookstores get, and they order the book. And it will be called Teen Tribe, and it will be coming out in 2013. So I hope you all go and either buy it or look at the library for it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This looks like a great addition. And one other thing, I want to talk about the little dress that you're wearing today.
Oh, you like it?
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
So there we go.
Well,
it's Le Petit Luminaire vient du cœur. And what does that mean?
Oh, what a good accent. Le Petit Luminaire vient du cœur means the little luminary, the little sun comes from the heart. And as I was wondering what to wear, I was just thinking this morning, it sort of sums up the project for me, Barbara, because, you know, I think this project is really is sort of a work of art. It's these intimate portraits of my 2 sons, their relationship with their friends, and it comes from the heart, really. And I just thought, well, why not? Then became like a little motto in my head, you know. And I think it's also allowed me to have this kind of access that it does come from the heart, and they know that this heart is kind-minded. You know,
Yes,
it's not
absolutely.
out to show them in any kind of sensational way, which I could have done. And I think that creates that intimacy, and it also allowed for the project to exist the way it is.
Looks like we're running out of time. So I would like to thank you, Martine Fougeron, for joining us, our sponsor, Professional Women Photographers, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and of course, all of you for joining us on tonight's edition of PhotoTalk. See you next time.
It went fast.
It went very fast.